Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Area 312 Rock and Metal Vodcast. I'm Rex, along with my co-host.
Hey, friends, I'm Kent.
And friends, today our guest is a guitarist that has been in several bands. He formed the band Recon and was in Deliverance in the early 90s. He started the band Worldview with Ray Para in 2013 and is now in the band Human Code, and they are getting ready to release their first record. Please welcome with me, George Ochoa.
Hey, George, welcome. And friends, I also want to say a very special guest today with George, hanging with George. We didn't know this. None other than, 35th anniversary, Glen Mancaruso from Vengeance. Glen, it's good to have you hanging too.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. And congratulations on the
surprise.
anniversary. Now, George, I'm going to let you introduce Miss Kathy back there and tell everybody about her.
Oh, we got Miss Kathy LaVerde back there. Wave, Kathy. We brought her because she's prettier than Glenn and I, so we brought her in for that. And she's a great bass player on her own, and she's been around the scene for a long time. She actually got saved at a Deliverance concert, right?
Yeah, 1988.
1988, she got saved at a Deliverance concert. She's been playing bass for a while, and her son is actually Daniel LaVerde, which plays drums for Jeff Tate and is currently on the road, I believe, with him. So
Awesome.
like I said earlier, she raised them right. So there we go.
Very cool. So really quick,
By the
George,
way,
I'd
just to
like
let you know, we're all together here because we just did a sanctuary service, and Kathy plays bass. Glenn flew out from LA to play drums, and I play guitar. And our fearless leader is Jim LaVerde. So we just got back from doing that like minutes ago.
Jim LaVerde not married to Kathy LaVerde.
Great. Well, George, let's just go ahead. Let's talk about Human Code, and I would really call this a super group, if you ask me. The band formed in 2022, if I'm not mistaken, and it consists of Michael Drive on vocals from Barren Cross, of course, and then Todd Libby plays bass, and he was with you with Recon and Worldview, and then yourself on guitar and keyboards, and then the awesome Terry Russell on drums from Holy Soldier. Can you tell us how the band all came together?
That's a little bit of a funny story. I remember I used to Mike Lee back then. Now he prefers to go by Michael Drive. So let's just call him Michael Drive from here on out. He lived literally like 10 minutes from me. And please don't take this as any kind of like boastful comment, but I would almost pester him, say, "Hey, Mike, you live down the street from me. Let's do something." And it just profounded me that he would never want to get together. Oh, I'm really busy and this and that. So you kind of blew me off, to be honest with you, for a while. Till somebody finally told him, I think Drew that lives with him said, "Hey, you really got to do something with George," because he wasn't doing a whole lot after Barren Cross. So that's why I thought, you live 10 minutes from me. Let's start getting together and see what happens. Well, as it turns out, I gave up on him. I forget it. I guess he doesn't want to jam with me. So he ended up calling me one day and said, "I got it, come on up." And we ended up hanging out. And to his surprise, he liked all my material and everything. So he said, "I've heard enough. Let's work together." I go, "Gee, thanks for gracing me with your presence. I appreciate it." But anyway, so we ended up, we're like peas in the pods from there on out, as far as the writing team. I'd write music and he'd write the lyrics and melodies. And yeah, I mean, Todd's always been my right-hand man with a lot of things, Todd Libby. So he was playing bass. And then we were contemplating, actually, let me back up a little bit. We were actually going to do Worldview again, and we still are. We're going to do another Worldview record. That's with Ray Parra. So we recruited, Todd and I recruited Terry Russell to do that. And because Johnny, our previous Worldview drummer, it wasn't working out with him. So we got Terry to do Worldview. Then we got Mike in the picture, and we were going to kind of be Worldview at that point because Ray Parra ended up getting really busy with Deny the Fallen. So we kind of gave it a world of being Worldview. Oh, there's Jim LaVerde in the front over. So anyway, being Michael Drive, as hard headed as he is, he kind of wanted to change a lot of the style, what's going on with Worldview, and we were, like I said, we were going to be Worldview at that point. He was going to be the singer, and that was really starting to annoy me, to be honest with you. And I said, no, I don't want to change Worldview style. We're kind of more cinematic / power metal. You know, that's how the first album is. And I just told I'll tell you what, let's just form another band where you're not going to pervert Worldview, because, you know, I don't want Worldview touched as far as the style, because he wanted to change everything around. He was saying that everything was 80s sounding and all that stuff. So rather than argue with him, I just said, I'll tell you what, let's just start another band, and we'll have no limitations as far as our style. We could do whatever you want, whatever I want, but I wanted to keep Worldview, you know, pure for the power metal cinematic side. I mean, I personally really like that stuff. Still saying on Worldview, I ended up talking to Ray Parr later, and he said, no, I'll do the next Worldview. So we're going to still do it with Ray Parr. As soon as we're done with this Human Code record, we're going to start. The whole album's written for Worldview 2. So we're going to put that out. And is Jim here?
Yeah.
Oh. And we're going to put that out. And so now let's go to Human Code. So now that Human Code is not going to be perverted by Michael Drive, we ended up just saying, okay, let's just do whatever, you know, no holds barred type of style. So that's how kind of Worldview morphed into Human Code, you know. And so the two bands are separate, and they're still in I mean, Human Code's about to put out their record, and then hopefully by the end of the year we'll still put out the Worldview record as well. And by the way, my lovely wife just walked in. Why don't you say hi? My wife, Denise.
Hello, Miss Ochoa.
Hi, Denise.
That's Miss Denise. So we got a party going on here.
Awesome. That's great. And then speaking of Human Code in that, I met you guys at last year's Immortal Fest, and the band played at last year's Immortal Fest, and you played at the first part of the festival this year, and you guys had 2 special guests for a couple songs play. You guys had, of course, Ray Paris and Jim LaVerde play 2 Barren Cross songs. How did that go? How was the performance, and how was everything at this year's Immortal Fest, George?
You know what's funny about that is I gotta be real honest with you. I was a little envious. I'll tell you why. Because after we finished the 2 Barren Cross songs, there was way more cheers for that than our Human Code stuff. Now, here's the funny part about that. Honestly, Human Code has not released a record yet, so everybody in the audience was kind of like feeling this out. They can't sing along with the lyrics to a song that they haven't, you know, listened to. So they were kind of like, didn't know what to expect. I mean, they saw us last year, but that's the last time anybody saw us. So I get it. If everybody's heard these, we did Deadlock and Imaginary Music.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows those songs. So of course they're going to, we really like those. And they got excited about those. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun playing with. I love Jim. I love Jim to death. He's become one of my brothers here in Nashville. And I mean, little brothers almost. And Ray Paris was just such a pleasure to be around. So I love Ray. So it was a lot of fun.
Cool. Well, and speaking of guest appearances, you also was a guest on Deliverance's set where you performed Weapons of Our Warfare and No Time. And I did see video of that, and you could tell the crowd was really loving it when you were there in that performance, George. How is it to be back with Deliverance again, and how are the guys doing there?
That was cool. Like a week before it happened, Jimmy called me and he said, "Hey, since you're going to be there, you want to get up there and do Weapons with us?" I go, "Yeah, sure, why not?" So I ended up doing it, and he said, "Close out the set with us." And I just said, "I'll just play Weapons." And then, "What do you play after Weapons?" He said, "No Time." Okay, perfect. I'll play No Time with you guys. And then they had one more song after that, which was they always close out their set with No Sanctuary, because Jimmy loves that song.
Yeah.
Who wrote that song?
Terry Scott
originally?
Taylor wrote that.
Yeah, Terry Taylor.
From Daniel Amos.
And he loves that song. And when I played with Deliverance at Immortal Fest, what year was that, Denise? I don't remember. I'm bad with dates, but we closed with that song too. And I wasn't on that original recording, but it's a great song. So I ended up playing those two songs, and I had a good time. It was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. So when, George, exactly will the new Human Code record be coming out? It's not out yet, is it?
No, it's supposed to be officially out by early September, but we're really pushing towards that. And just a quick note, John Dino Elefante is actually helping me mix it, so that's a big deal. So I pretty much give him the credit for mixing them. He's just sitting in front of my console and just tweaking everything, making it sound
well. And I heard you have
I thought I had it sounding good, but he really has it sounding good. I mean, Vito knows what he's doing. He's done many, many, many records. He's a staple here in Nashville, and I'm honored that he actually considered even working with us. So
now, go ahead, Kent.
I was just curious, Glenn, did you happen to make Immortal Fest Part 1?
I'm sorry. You talking to me?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is your name Glenn?
Sorry. Repeat the question. Sorry.
I was just wondering, Glenn, if you had a chance to make any of the Immortal Fest and hang with your old friends and all that stuff.
I did not. I was going to come out to the Mortification that they played at, and then because we were going to do the worship team, but that fell through. So I don't know if I'm going to go to September one. I'd like to just to check it out and hang out. You know, I got to hang out with Roger Martin. He came to the service yesterday and today, so I haven't seen Roger since we played in 2017, and you know. I used to see Larry all the time, but he moved away. He moved out of California too. So yeah, it'd be nice to hang out and see all my other friends. You know,
Yeah, you bet. You bet.
I miss that. You know, but hopefully next one.
Yes, sir.
Now,
just
Jordan,
so you know, Kathy played with us at the worship team at Immortal Fest because we did a set in a separate location about 2 blocks away from Immortal Fest. We had a sanctuary. Almost convention where there was different teachings, and we had Jim LaVerde leading worship. I played on there, Kathy played, and her son played drums. So Daniel played drums, because Glenn couldn't make it. So he was a good feeling.
Cool. And George, when you said Dino mixed the album, this would be at your studio. I heard that you have a pretty incredible studio. Was this done at your studio, the mixing?
Yeah, we're not done. We're in the midst of it right now. So we're trying to finish everything up. So yes, it will be done at my studio in Nashville, which is technically Mount Juliet, which is a little east of downtown Nashville. We're about 35 minutes outside of Nashville.
Okay. Well, and we're kind of going to go back to the beginning here, George. And when you were growing up, was music a big part of your childhood growing up? And who were some of your musical influences growing up?
My main influence was probably Liberace, you know, and Karen Carpenter.
Hey, Karen Carpenter's a good drummer.
Glenn knows Karen can play those drums.
Most people don't know that. Most people didn't know that she was actually a great drummer. Jim Neighbors was a huge influence.
George, you're killing me, man. Come on.
He had a good voice, didn't he? All the young people go, who? Jim who?
Yeah, they wouldn't know who that is. No.
I have no idea who Gomer Pyle is.
Nope.
Yeah.
And don't forget
before my time.
And don't forget the cast of Hee Haw. You got a lot of his influences off of Hee Haw.
Yeah, Hee Haw.
Your age.
Wait, so one more time, my influences. I've always been a metalhead. You know what? Even at my age now, I'm still a metalhead at heart. So, I mean, I've been on like Judas Priest, Iron Maiden. I was a huge Queensryche fan in the day. Those first like 5 albums were just like, I wore out when they were cassettes. Remember, kids, when you don't know? I know the kids don't know what cassettes are, but I wore out. Probably The Warning and Mind Crime. I mean that's. If you really think about it, Recon was a kind of a Queensryche ripoff band, you know, in a sense. We're a little heavier, but you know, that was a huge influence for me at that time. So
okay.
So
gotcha.
So But yeah, even to this day, I'm Sabbath, all that stuff, the Dio stuff. To be honest with you, I think Heaven and Hell is one of the greatest metal albums ever recorded. So that's great. I've always loved Dio, and in fact, Ray Parr and I want to release it anytime real soon. As we did a version of "Don't Talk to Strangers," and we'll release that sometime soon.
Oh, I
But
would love.
Ray Parr nails it. If anybody can do Dio, oh my gosh, he can do it.
I would love to hear that, George. Yeah, you guys have to release that, please. That
Yeah,
would be
we will.
awesome. And if I could ask, George, could you kind of tell us your journey to faith, how you became a Christian, or how that all happened?
You know, it's funny. I just turned 61, so I know that's old. And some of you guys are turning off the video right about now. I don't want to hear this old guy. But I got saved at actually 21 when I became, that's when I became a Christian. And it's kind of a really, I'll give you the short version, obviously, but I grew up quote unquote Catholic, and this isn't a bash on Catholics or anything like that, but for me personally, it didn't mean a whole lot. It was just something I was born into, and it's like, okay, I'm Catholic and I'm good, and I did my first communion and all that good stuff, and you tend to think that that's enough, or you're on God's team at that point. But till you realize that you really don't have a relationship with Him, and when you realize that your life is really all about you and not about God, and you just kind of throw God in there as an afterthought. Well, obviously, the Christian, true Christian, I mean, your whole worldview changes, and your whole outlook on life, 100%. I mean, it's a 180 degree. Now, all of a sudden, the things of God are your most important things in your life. It all goes through that filter. So I would say, when I came to that realization, it's funny. It's hard for me to do this because of where this individual's at this point. But God even used a guy like Roger Martinez. I remember seeing him on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood, and he was going somewhere, and I think I was going to the doctor's. And oh man, I'm serving God now, he's telling me, and I'm kind of going, what? Because I knew Roger from junior high, and he was like a complete and absolute loser, and and that's not to berate the guy at all, but he, just a party animal, this and that, and just to know that God changed this guy's life, it was like pretty amazing to me. And he invited me to a Bible study, and at a place called House on the Hill, and I ended up going. And I'm telling you, that's I think when I came to faith, at a actual Bible study. I still remember the guy going up there and goes, if you serve God, you want to serve Jesus, stand up right now. And who in here, loves Jesus? And everybody in the Bible study like stood up. And I remember at that point telling myself, okay, George, if you stand up, you better mean it, So I stood up, and I think that's when I took my first stand for Christ. And from then on, I could say, I guess hasn't been a perfect road, but I've definitely from that point, started serving God. And again, like I just said, now all of a sudden, now God is coming to your heart. Now he's actually you're born again, and now you have a different outlook on life. I mean, there's a lot of people that want to say a little prayer and think that they're good. Just like I thought when I was a Catholic, I was good. But if your whole worldview doesn't change, and your whole outlook on life and your priorities in life don't change, maybe you never made that commitment to Christ. So I could say that at that point, my life definitely 100% changed, And again, not that I've lived the perfect life. None of us can say that. He is without sin.
Mm-hmm.
The Bible says he's a liar and the truth not in him. So, we'll all struggle with sin because we live in this flesh, But the only time we're going to be delivered of sin is, obviously when we receive our new bodies, and we're either raptured or die and go to the kingdom. So there you go.
So George, you were talking about Roger, and I just like Roger Martinez, and I just like to just sparked thought here for a second. Now, of course, Glenn, I'm also a Die Happy fan, so I remember Die Happy, of course, and Vengeance. Now, you mentioned George Roger Martinez. You guys were in a band called Prophet, you and Roger, is that correct?
Correct.
And
then after that, like since I started going to the Bible study, now I was in the club. I was a Christian. He recruited me to play guitar for a band that he wanted to start. And believe it or not, it was before we even heard of Stryper. Stryper was in, and we were told about this band Stryper after we already had started Prophet. Oh wow, there's other people out there doing this Christian metal stuff.
And Roger was a guitar player in Prophet.
That's what I was wanting to ask. What was Roger's? I don't know anything about Prophet other than y'all released a single. I was just kind of wondering what Roger did, if he was doing his vocal stylings back then, or if he was a guitar player.
No, he was a guitar player. We actually had a singer, so he was a pretty decent singer. So, yeah, he didn't become a growler till Vengeance.
Well, and how did that band actually form in that? That was going to be actually my next question, George. You had Dion Sanchez and Roger. Who else was in the band, and how did it kind of come together?
Who do we have on drums? I'm trying to remember. Oh, Johnny Pennington.
Yeah. Tommy Lee.
Yeah, no, not really. That was The Rock. Yeah.
So, Glenn, I'm noticing something, Glenn. In all of these things, never once has George said, "Yeah, we had Glen Mancaruso on drums with us."
No, he didn't call me when they were putting Human Code together.
He was in The Rock for a little while, which is kind of right after Prophet.
Right after Prophet.
Yeah.
And before Vengeance, right after Prophet, I played with them for I think we only did one gig though.
At the water.
Then he's like, "You're out of here."
Yeah, I kicked him out.
Hey, you were great, Glenn. You are great. You're a great drummer.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I think Glenn can expand a little bit on like what happened with Vengeance, how they got started. I mean, if you don't mind, because that's a good, that's a really important part, I think, of Christian metal history. Because Bob, I gotta say, Bob Beeman was probably a lot more behind them than most other Christian bands, other than maybe Barren Cross, which, because Jim's always been kind of Bob's right hand man, but he really took a special interest to Vengeance, because he knew that there was a big, huge hole there for thrash bands. Most of the other bands, like Stryper or whatever, or were kind of covering the just regular metal genre, but the really dark area of like thrash and speed metal and all that's where Vengeance fit in.
Well, I was introduced to Glenn through Vengeance back in 1988. I picked up the cassette. I hadn't heard a lick off of Human Sacrifice, but myself as a young Christian and a young metalhead, it's like I saw Intense Records and I'm like, oh, I gotta have this. I don't know what it is, but I know it's metal. Glenn, I can't even begin to describe.
Did it scare you?
No, I thought the cover was incredible, Glenn. I was like, yeah, you knew it was going to be heavy just from the cover.
That's true. That's very true. That was on purpose.
Yeah.
I had no expectations, Glenn. I didn't know what I was quote unquote getting into. I can't remember if I bought Sacred Warriors Rebellion at the same time as that, or that might have been a year later when I found it along with Rage of Angels. But nonetheless, I took to you guys like a duck takes to water. It took a little bit of getting used to with the vocals, because Christian or mainstream, it was just intense. I mean, it befit the record label. But I'm going to tell you something, and I've told Rex can verify this, and forgive me, I don't mean to get off course here, but
No. I want to go off this course. This is awesome.
I just want to say, Glenn, that once I got it, and I wrote the lyrics down to White Throne on my jeans, and I was in drama class, and I wrote it on the chalkboard at school, the lyrics to White Throne. I mean, it meant that much to me. And of course, Burn Satan Burn, and then Mulligan Stew was so funny. I mean, it's very true, but just the lyrics, there's some neat little humorous inflections in there, and wolfing a bunch of munchies and all that stuff. And anyway, good stuff. Love you guys. Loved Once Dead, the second album, and I love Die Happy too.
And just so you know, that George, when we started playing, he was our official sound guy.
Yeah, I was a Vengeance sound.
He used to run sound for us.
Well,
Of course,
George,
they never paid me. I'm waiting for a check.
No. We just fed them.
George, what would you mentioned something, and I don't want to veer off course too much because George, today we love you guys. Like Rex and I always say, you guys were actually our youth ministers that played music and spoke to us. And that's why we do this. And so thank you.
Awesome.
And
Yes,
all glory
thank
to
you.
the Lord, all glory to him.
That's right. Amen.
Thank you all for being the vessels. But what I would like to interject at this juncture, because George, you mentioned something. You said there was something seemingly important with you about vengeance here, George, and we do love vengeance, but what would you all like to say about that?
About what specifically?
Well, you wanted to veer off course. You said just a little bit about vengeance. Is there anything?
Oh no. Well, obviously the state of where Roger's at now, I think is a secret. I think most people know that he's actually turned away from Christ and I don't think he's truly embraced Satanism, like he's worships the devil. True Satanism actually, and not that I'm an expert on Satanism, but even Anton LaVerde said true Satanism is hedonism, just serving self.
Serve yourself.
Yeah, just serving self, and it's not necessarily about bowing down to Satan or Lucifer.
Do what thou wilt.
Yeah,
That's
and that's the true philosophy. But the bottom line is. First John says that they went out from us because they were never of us. And I'm going to have to believe that scripture when it comes to Roger, that maybe even though I sat under him doing even many sermons, because I was part of the leadership at Sanctuary Hollywood that Roger was senior pastor to. And he actually preached some really good sermons, but hey, Balaam's ass also talked, didn't he? So, and then every bottle of poison, there are some minerals. So, you know what I mean? God can use any vessel. He spoke to the high priest in the time of Christ and prophesied the coming of Christ and his resurrection. And because he was a high priest, God used him. But was he a follower of God? No, he wasn't. He was.
Well, the Lord used Pharaoh.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So God could speak in mysterious ways that we don't necessarily always think he necessarily does, but he has. So I think God even used Roger at that time, but I'm going to have to believe that because it's been so many years now that he's departed, and who knows, on his deathbed he can be like the thief on the cross and give his life back to Christ. He could be prodigal all these years. That's God's ultimate job to judge him. Obviously not mine or anybody else's, but the bottom line is that he is definitely, shall we say, almost an enemy of the faith, and but at the same time, where Jesus said, pray for your enemies. Pray for those who spitefully use you. So we got to have a spirit of prayer for him and this and that. Because,
so I'd like to say something real quick, and I might get a little emotional. Roger, if you ever come across this, I want you to know that you are loved. And I prayed for you at different junctures throughout the years. And Yeshua, the King above kings and Lord above lords, he is your first love. And he loves you. I love you, Roger, and I want to thank you whenever you served the King of kings and Lord of lords, and thank you for the message that you imparted. And Roger, I just want you to know you're loved. You're not hated. And please return to your first love. So just thank you, Roger, if you ever come across this. So, George,
that's pretty awesome. Thank you.
George, you joined Vengeance, I know, for the touring band, released upon the Earth Era 1992. I don't have that album. I didn't have the one prior to that either. Kind of when Die Happy formed, I kind of, didn't pick any other Vengeance albums up at the time. Did you actually perform, George, on the album released upon the earth, or was it strictly with the touring band at the time?
I did do some stuff on there, and I helped them engineer a lot of it. And again, you got to remember, with me, I have a little bit different relationship with Rogers than most people because I grew up with him. Because I grew up with him, and my wife at the time, and his wife were pretty close, so we used to hang out a lot. And then that marriage, his wife dissolved, so we were kind of part of that whole dissolving thing, and so there was a lot of emotional like tied to him. So sometimes I've gotten angry at Roger because from the standpoint of like he has disappointed me in a big way, because I was his associate pastor, and I was his friend, and part of my, remember, anger usually is a secondary emotion. It's usually stemmed in like hurt. So that I got kind of like bummed out about that he and at the end he really of like the last one of the few times I talked to him, he was living with me, and he was like morphing into satanic Roger, and it was hard for me to see. He started wearing a pentagram, and I said, "Don't wear that in my house. I don't want it." And we started arguing. So, and then he started accusing me of being a fake Christian and this and that. And then he really, really went off the deep end at that point. But I appreciate what you just did. But at the same time, like I said, he could be a prodigal son, or he could be somebody that just needs to bow the knee to Christ for the first time. I don't know. That's all in God's hands. And thank you for the putting it all in the right perspective right now. And I would love to hear that Roger, has bowed the knee to Christ. And who cares about vengeance or any of that stuff? The more important thing is that he's back in the fold,
Sure.
And from what I understand, I don't know if he's got a terminal illness. I heard that, but just this is a call out for anybody watching this to pray for Roger, pray for him. If you've prayed for him in the past, pray for him even more, And I do appreciate one thing about Roger, though, in recent interviews that I've heard him do or that he's done, he's never really badmouthed me in any way. So that's always nice. He's badmouthed a lot of people. He hasn't badmouthed me really publicly, and I appreciate that about him. And I wonder if it bothers him when he hears me, because we both did an interview with a guy named Simon that does, and I gave Roger all my accolades that, hey, the Lord used him to bring me to faith. I don't know if Roger likes to hear that or not, but it's you know what? It's the truth. Good Lord used Roger to bring me to faith. So, amen.
Yeah. Well, George, after the band Prophet, you formed the band Recon. How did you form Recon? How did the band get together, and the circumstances with that?
That was cool because we just ended up Vet Roberts, the singer, and Johnny Gonzalez used to be in a band called oh gosh, what was the name of the band? Seven Thunder with Roy Z, which Roy Z now works with, like, Bruce Dickinson, and he's worked with Rob Halford. And that band dissolved, and then they ended up coming over playing with me, and then we recruited Eddie Starline on guitar, and we later ended up getting Mike Grotto on bass, and we recorded the record. That's a whole nother story in itself. But and that was, again, remember I told you earlier that I was a big Queensryche fan, so it's kind of had a lot of Queensryche flavorings, and some of the other guys in the band really like Queensryche too. Remember now that we're talking like the first four Queensryche albums that I'm really.
But George, you said something earlier. Now Vet, brilliant vocalist, and of course he does have the Jeff Tate inflections. But musically, though, you guys were pretty hard and heavy back then. So I feel like you guys were a little heavier than Queensryche, and I mean that in a good way. And I like Queensryche too. I never, other than Vet's voice, I feel like you guys were kind of doing your own thing musically. So, I don't discount Recon. It's a wonderful, brilliant album. It's good.
Well, and my favorite song, George, from that is Dreams, and that was on the California Metal 2 compilation. And Alive is another great song from that album that really gets me.
Yeah.
That's a good fast tempo rock song. Ken,
That's
did
the
you
first
have?
song we ever wrote together live as a band.
Oh,
First song
okay,
we wrote. Yeah.
gotcha. Ken, did you have any other things about Recon that you wanted
Sure.
to ask the record?
Sure. I've got a couple questions if y'all don't mind. Now, of course, Behind Enemy Lines, it's a revered album. Now, George, you produced and mixed this album, and later you would also produce Weapons of Our Warfare with Deliverance, and what a joke. And later you would do Primitive Rhythm Machine with Mortification and play on that, and then you would also produce Worldview. My question, George, is with regard to Recon and onward as a producer, what does that mean for you? As a producer, what does that entail?
I'm a control freak, so I have to control. I have to control all the music and the arrangements and everything like that.
Fact check that.
Glen's our fact checker. There you go.
Should I be honest or tell you the lie?
Yeah,
What
yeah,
I just said was probably the most honest thing I've ever said.
Yeah.
That's the best policy. So are you looking for specific sounds out of the albums and
Yeah, I without sounding boastful in any way, I'm not, but I've always been a primary writer in any project I've been. I mean, with the exception of Deliverance, what Jimmy is by far a great talent in itself. So when two talents came together, obviously what came together that was Weapons, which is a brilliant album itself. So and I'm not saying that for myself. That's
brilliant.
We've got a lot of critical acclaim through the years because of that record. Yeah, I've always been the main writer, main arranger. Again, outside of that record, because Jimmy's a big powerhouse himself, I was honored to just join forces with him. Mm-hmm. So I would say that me producing, I didn't push myself on Jimmy to produce Weapons, but I said, I'd like to produce it, and he was graceful enough to let me do it. And so, yeah, I guess it's just, you know what? Here's the bottom line. I'm working with Dino right now, and I've told Dino this, but he and John were a big influence with me as far as production, being a producer, because I saw them work at Pachyderm. I go, man, I'd like to do what they're doing, and these guys know what they're doing. So I learned a lot from them, and I was all ears. We recorded those California Metal 2 songs with them, and just those 2 songs, I learned so much with them. And I'd go to the studio every once in a while, here and there. And just watching them work was awesome to me, and how professional they were and picky. And so that was my training ground for being a producer, And again, at my age, I think that's what I ultimately want to ride off into the sunset doing, is producing bands. Because there's a point, obviously, where an artist just stops playing. I mean, not that I have to, but maybe there's a time where maybe you can't physically do it anymore or whatever, but you can still produce.
Yes, sir. You can. And, actually with modern technology, it might be easier, maybe not get out on the road, but at least make some albums, with files and all that. But so, George, let me ask then, with regard to Recon, and we got into Deliverance some. This was the only studio album that was actually released by Recon, and it was wonderful. George, did Recon fold due to you joining? This was released in 1990. Did Recon fold due to your having joined Deliverance for Weapons, or was Recon already kind of fizzling out, and then, and so you went on to Deliverance?
Well, all right, you're going to force me to tell the story now, which is fine, which I don't mind, Deliverance Recon was kind of fizzling out for various reasons. And then Jimmy came to one of our shows, because believe it or not, here goes Roger again, as a big part of my history. Roger told, because Deliverance was looking for a guitar player, and Roger told Jimmy, goes, you should get George in your band. And he goes, oh, what's he done or whatever? And he goes, he's going to play whatever at this such and such place in Burbank. So we played a church in Burbank, and Jimmy showed up, and I guess he liked what he heard. He said, hey, come on out to my car. We just finished our first record, I missed being on that first record by 3 weeks or a month. And and I heard it. He goes, hey, would you be interested in playing with us? I said, yeah, sure, why not? I really liked what I heard off the first record. And so at that point, because already Recon was kind of fizzling out for various reasons, that I don't need to drag anybody's name through the mud.
Sure,
but,
we're not
yeah. So I just said, okay, let me I kind of started working with Recon. I mean with Deliverance. Now how the Recon album got resurrected a little bit is we had all the songs written and we had a whole album's worth of stuff. It was just a shame to me to just see it just go away. So what I ended up doing is I ended up talking to, believe it or not, Recon was going to do a record on Pachyderm with John and Dino. But John and Dino would not touch me because I was already in Deliverance. And that was another label. That was Jim Kepner with Intense. So he said, you're on their label. I can't work with you with Recon on this label. I said, okay. So at that point, I brought it up to Jim Kempner of Frontline Intense Records.
Mm-hmm.
I said, hey, is it okay if I do a record with John and Dino, even though I'm in Deliverance? I mean, I'm not really on the Deliverance contract anyways, which I wasn't. He goes, well, here's a competition factor. Why you're doing it over there with Dino? Why don't you just do it over here? The Recon record. I go, I guess I can. So right then and there, he hits a little button, goes, hey, bring a contract in here for Recon. I want to, He signs Recon to a record label without hearing a note of the band. I'll tell you why he did it, because he wanted to take it away from John and Dino. Yeah. So he just said he didn't hear one note of it. We could have been terrible, but he said okay. And I remember signing the contract right there. And so we did it with Intense.
Well, we as fans, we've been blessed. We've been doubly blessed. So I'm glad all that transpired.
Well, and from what I understand, George, possibly you tried to get Recon back together in '94, and then you reunite in 2001 and perform at the Cornerstone Festival. Is there any unreleased recordings from that time frame at all between the first record and 2001, or that you can say anything about that might be out there?
Well, here's the thing. A lot of people don't like to hear this, but I say it anyways because I'm one of those blunt guys. So, Recon 2.0 really is Worldview.
Okay.
I would say, because there's some of the songs that were slated for the second Recon record that were on that first Worldview record.
Okay.
And without, bagging on Vet or anything like that, Ray Parra is one of the best singers on the planet as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
And so those songs that I wrote for Recon, they fit him beautifully, because he's kind of got a Tate influence as well, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to tell you, anything that happened after Recon that was going to be slated for a possible Recon second record ended up on the Worldview record. And to be honest with you, here's the part that people don't like to hear. The hardcore Recon fans is I think it's 2.0 and it far surpasses that first Recon record. That's my opinion, because I'm partial, because I'm pretty proud of that Worldview record.
Mm-hmm.
And we worked really hard on it, and I think it's far superior material than even Recon. But then again, you know what? So many people end up really loving that Recon record, and sometimes I have to scratch my head going, it seems like people like Recon better than Worldview, and I work so much harder on Worldview. Why don't they like Worldview as much?
The thing about it, George, so, Worldview and Human Code, and we earlier, these records are just classics that we grew up with. They're wonderful. They're endeared to our hearts. That doesn't mean that, and I know Worldview came out in 2015 and Human Code, will be releasing, and then a new Worldview album. But, George, it's just time. time's the differing factor, and you give things enough time, and these will be classics too, you know. And
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you before we kind of keep moving on here, but I'd like to ask you about this classic release since we were talking about Deliverance.
What a joke.
What a joke. Now, here's what I'd like to ask about What a Joke. I thought that you guys, so there was a band called Exodus, if y'all remember Exodus.
Yes.
A thrash band. They had an album back in the late 80s. It was called Pleasures of the Flesh, and I remember a song called Deranged on there, and it was spoken word stuff, and they were being silly. Now, the whole of this album, there's some great stuff on here. Prophet of Idiocy, you know, the title track, Pseudo-Intellectual, great stuff on here. I also thought, though, with some of the things like Chipped Beef and stuff like that, that you guys were maybe kind of going for an Exodus vibe. But then I also heard, I don't know if it's an urban legend or the truth, and I'm coming to the source. I also heard a story about maybe this being crafted with the intent to be released from your recording contract. So, George, I'd like to ask, if I may, and we can always hit that pass button, but was this crafted with the intent that your former record label would release you, or was there a rub there or something with the record label?
There was a little bit of strained relationships there, a little bit for a little while, with the record company with the Intense. I so specifically remember having a lunch with the A&R rep, Jimmy and he said, hey guys, I really need a record. This is after Weapons. Jimmy and I had this grandiose plan to release an album called Hypocrisy at that time. And we wanted to be Hypocrisy. And we wanted to like have it be a total follow-up to Weapons. Well, we hadn't written too many material for it because we just wanted it to surpass Weapons. Mm-hmm. They told us either you give us a record by, I still remember the rep told us, you give us a record by such and such a date, because we're not going to be ready. We haven't written all around. We have such a big vision for this record. They said, give us a record by such and such a date. These are almost the exact words, or I'll make sure you guys never record a record again. Okay, whatever. So we walked out of that meeting going, well, let's give them a record. And What a Joke is what we gave them, because we just kind of, okay, let's, and if we didn't go after the Exodus 5, to be honest with you, it was more the SOD, Stormtrooper's Death 5. Yep. If you remember that record, mm-hmm. The SOD record, which it was a bunch of little snippet songs.
Right.
That was more our influence for What a Joke. And, you know, at that time, to be honest with you, in fairness to Jimmy, I was into like Sepultura and all the heavy bands like that. Mm-hmm. And I kind of, I don't want to say forced him, but highly influenced him to sing that way. And it really wasn't Jimmy. It's a big mistake. Jimmy's a great singer. Mm-hmm. And in hindsight, I regret it. He regrets having listened to me. And that, you know, he still says it to this day, like, oh my gosh, I hate that album because it really wasn't Jimmy, you know. And so that record, without like belittling it in any way, because I know a lot of people like it because it's got that raw feel. That's what we went for, to be honest with you. We achieved what we wanted to, but that's not the record that Jimmy and I wanted to follow up Weapons with. That was the record where, I hate to say it, kind of forced to do. And it was by no means to clear it up with you, an attempt to get off the label. It was just an attempt to like, okay, here's a record you wanted. Let us do the record we really want to do after this. By then, we had some strained relationships with Jimmy and differences of vision and this and that. So that's when I departed, or, you know, and it was a mutual departure. So, you know, we never got to do that record that we really wanted to do, following up Weapons. So who knows what would have happened, but hey, God has plans for all things. So all things work together for the good of those who love God and call according to his purpose. So there you go. I mean, it didn't end up ever happening, and who knows? God knows.
Of interesting note was the fact that Mike Grotto was brought back, you know, your old buddy from Recon brought into perform bass on the album. So I thought that was kind of neat to see Mike, on the album.
Yeah. He stayed after I left, and he did the next record, I think, too, with Deliverance.
Well, then in 2010, you again play with Jimmy and his side project, George, Jupiter 4.
Jupiter 6.
Or Jupiter 6, I'm sorry. You hadn't done much musically for a while. If I can ask, why was this, and how did you hook back up with Jimmy?
I think I was in Vegas at the time, or I was coming to Vegas. I told him I was coming to Vegas and say, "Hey, can you cut some leads on my record, my solo project?" Yeah, no problem. So it's just as simple as me. I walked into his studio at his house and plugged in, and none of that was rehearsed. It was all like, "Okay, I want you to do a solo here. Go." All right, here we go. And I did it, and it turned out actually being pretty cool. So I think I played about 3 or 4 songs on that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was fun. It was way different than Deliverance. I mean, so
yes.
it wasn't Deliverance by any means.
Well, then in 2013, you formed the band Worldview, and Ray Para is on vocals. You are on guitars and keyboards, I believe. Todd Libby is on bass. Johnny Gonzalez is on drums. In 2015, you released the album Chosen Few. You even produced the recording. In my opinion, George, and I'm not just saying this is an excellent record that I feel did not get the attention that it deserves. And I kind of am in your camp where I like the Worldview record more than the Recon record. To me, it sounded like Queensryche with like keyboards kind of throughout the whole record that are done tastefully. The Last Cry, that song is one of my personal favorites. It has some really cool time changes in it. I like Walk Through Fire. That has heavy, crunchy guitars. Back in Time, that's probably my second favorite song. Prisoner of Pain, that's another great song. Just let's talk about that and like how you did the record and how everything came together for that.
That's also an interesting story. You guys remember Rick Macias, right? The keyboardist to Sacred Warrior.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. When I first met Rick when we were on tour Deliverance, and we ended up playing in Chicago, and we went and hung out with Sacred Warrior at their studio. We went there. We all got along like peas and carrots, and it was awesome. And we ended up staying at Rick's house, the band, or a couple of the guys in the band. And for some reason, Rick and I like really hit it off at the point where like we exchanged numbers and we always talked on the phone and we always kept in touch. He came out to California and we'd hang out. And then he actually moved out to California for a while, and he kept his Harley at my house because he couldn't keep it where it was at. We spent Thanksgivings together. So Rick and I really, became good friends. And he and Ray Parr were always longtime best friends. And what ended up happening at that point is he'd always tell Ray, he goes, "Dude, we need to do something with George. We need to do a project with George." And believe it or not, this almost gives me chills thinking about this, is the day that Rick passed away, Ray Parr saw him that morning. And he even mentioned to him that day, because have you got in touch with George? Because you really need to do something we need to do something with George. The very day he passed away, then later that day he ended up passing away, and then they found him. And so we like to think that it was like Rick's kind of almost one of his dying wishes, that this happened. After Rick passed away, Ray did call me and he said, "Hey man, Rick always wanted us to do this. We should do this and dedicate the record to him." I go, "Absolutely." So it was an honor of a cool brother in Christ. It just ended up, unfortunately passing away. And Ray and I just started exchanging files. I started sending him songs, and he flew out and and Ray and I just just work together beautifully together. This isn't a slam on any other vocalist that I've ever worked with, including current company. But Ray has been the funnest singer that I've ever worked with because he's so easygoing, and he doesn't have lead singer syndrome like most singers do. He does not. He is just the most pleasurable, humble singer I've ever met, and I look forward to work with him again on the next Worldview. But so that's how Worldview 1 came to be. Since some of these songs that were going to be on Recon 2 were dormant, I updated them and made them a little bit more modern, and put them on this record. I think The Mirror is one of them. Back in Time, believe it or not, was a song that was going to be on Rex, one of your favorites. That was going to be on that's about my first wife, by the way. But and I've been married to my wife now, Denise, for 23 years, and I love her to death. We get along great. But what else can I tell you about Worldview other than I worked my butt off on that record? I think my favorite song of my wife's is the title track because there's so much to that song. I do like The Last Cry a lot. I love the first song that kicks off the record, Mortality. There was so much care and so much detail to that record. Bill Matoyer mixed it, which has worked with massive people. He's worked with obviously Tourniquet. He's obviously worked with Slayer. He's worked with Metallica in the old days, and he's a pleasure to work with too. And he wants to mix the next record, so I want him to mix the next record too. Because me as a producer, I'd like to mix it, but sometimes as a producer and you're the artist, you get a little too close to the project. So it's nice to hand it off to somebody else. So it'd be nice to hand it off to him. It's nice to hand off this new Human Code, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in a second, to Dino, because I'm a little too, when I'm the artist, I'm the guitar player, the songwriter, arranger, along with other guys that I work with. You got this tunnel vision a little bit too much, and it's nice to hand it off to somebody else to mix it. So anyway, so Bill mixed Human Code. We spent hours on doing that, and one more can I say that I think I did a good job of modernizing those Recon songs and writing some new ones, and it was a great record, a lot of detail.
There's brother Jim.
Hello. Look who just
Jim
showed up.
LaVerde. Hey.
Hey, Jim.
How's it going, buddy?
See, brother.
All right, let's shift the conversation to Barren Cross now.
Yes.
Barren Cross, man. Rock for the king, baby.
Finally, he said finally. You hear that?
About time.
It's about time.
I'm sitting here with
Three
two of my favorite
amigos.
people in the whole world. And so we're just we just had a couple of really awesome sanctuary services, and it was phenomenal. Just these guys did a great job on their instruments on worship, and of course Pastor Bob brought us the best message ever. So
Every message is the best message.
I always tell Pastor Bob, it's like, hey Bob, you got to deliver the best sermon you've ever preached every time he preaches.
No pressure.
No pressure.
No pressure. So
Well, and Jim, I want to say something, and I don't want to put you on the spot. You make these wonderful, what I'm going to call life story writings that you post about things that just makes you think. And I just want to tell you that I really appreciate those, and those mean a lot to me. So thank you for doing those when you do those. I really enjoy reading those.
What's his favorite thing to say? What say you?
what say you? Well, when I say what say you, we get lots of comments, right?
Yeah.
You know what? I just there's something about the story. When Jesus was walking on the earth, he did a lot of parables. And so I just try to take my own personal experiences that I've gone through. They can be as goofy as whatever, but as serious. and try to relay that back into a spiritual story that hey, look, you can go through this, and at the end of the game, this is what the Lord taught me. So I appreciate you. Thanks.
They're very heartfelt and honest and real. Like you say, I really appreciate that. Just how they come across. Yeah. Very, very awesome.
Did you like the one about the speeding tickets?
Yeah.
I just got a speeding ticket 2 days ago.
Oh, George, get to the altar.
Yeah.
But anyway, well, thank you for your kind words. I
Sure.
appreciate that. It's very encouraging,
Sure.
and I'll keep doing them. So,
Yeah.
And by the way, I
Thank
think
you.
this is awesome that we're not just talking about boring old George and his old we brought Glenn in. Now we got,
Yes.
hey,
I agree.
but man, feel free to ask Jim any questions. It's not robbing my time. I mean, I like this. This is awesome.
this is fun, man.
Well, this was a blessing. We, so Jim and Glenn, of course, you guys know how we feel. I mean, you guys have blessed us throughout the years with the music and the message. And George was supposed to be on yesterday, and I think he might have double booked or something. You're a wanted man, George. So we are triple blessed here. So this is awesome. I cut my grass yesterday, and I'm suffering from allergies, but this is worth the suffering. So
you got a 3 for a 1.
That's right.
There you go.
So Jim, I will ask you a question. I didn't see video of it yet, but you guys did play with Human Code 2 songs. How was that to do that? I'm sure you were, on cloud 9 to play Barren Cross songs again live.
Well, I mean, it just was a real honor to play with George and the guys in Human Code. All of them are just gracious, great musicians, and the thing is that we were talking about this the other day about the amount of history. When you think about it, we all took a picture together. The amount of history, the amount of years, the amount of stories that we all could tell. And I actually had more fun in the green room with them, just cutting up, and everybody's getting dressed and everybody's just having a great time. And there was just a really great sense of camaraderie, and lots of laughter with
laughter.
Teasing, you're wearing that.
So,
but it was just a lot of fun actually getting out on stage and playing with Terry, and who's a phenomenal drummer, and just a gem of a guy.
And Ray had a good time too.
Ray and
Ray loved it. He had a great
time. We did, and just it's to me, it's just it's about connecting, and we connected with these guys musically and personally, which is much more important anyway. And but just getting out there and just connecting with the audience, it was like we're there in the moment, and it was just, I can't tell you just about how much fun I had.
I think a lot of it has to do with like we're too old maybe for this at this point, but there's like no egos. I mean, everybody's just like, yeah, let's jam together. Let's do this. It's not like, no, you're part of that band. You're the competition. That might have been there in the old days a little bit, but at this age, we're like, who cares,
okay. So this was funny, and we're all laughing about. And somebody made the comment. I forget, maybe it was Todd or whoever said, "Aren't other band members not supposed to get along with each other? They're supposed to be fighting and harassment."
Or like competition. Yeah.
So.
Well,
ultimately, you guys are brothers in Christ,
Yeah,
that's right.
So let me ask something, Jim. You were talking about the history, and that's one of the reasons why Rex and I are when we felt led to do the Area 312 thing. It's because of this history, and we wish for the great music that you guys have delivered and others, along with the good news of Christ, which is in there. We hope to preserve it while it can be preserved, and hence kind of why we're doing Area 312. So my question is, Jim and George and Glenn and company, have you guys ever thought about writing chapters like a Barren Cross chapter, Georgia Recon / Deliverance / Worldview Human Code chapter, Glen Die Happy Vengeance, and talking, in your own words, writing these chapters and then compiling them for like a compendium, a history book on, as we know it as fans, Christian metal, and something for the fans to read. I think that would be very interesting.
That's a great idea.
Since you came up with the idea, why don't you start it?
Yeah,
and we'll contribute.
You see how that goes?
And we'll contribute. I'll give you my chapter. Jim will give you his. And...
Yeah. I think that it really is, George is right. It is a really good idea. I think it's really important to write down your history, to see where God has taken you from your early 20s up into now almost 60 years old, And, we've been through a lot of stuff, man. And a lot of people think that music is really easy. And you can ask these two guys right here. It's not. It's a lot of work. And, the payoff can be phenomenal, but there's so much that goes into it.
I hate to interrupt you, but I've talked with Bob about this and about a documentary done on this whole movement. And there's been a few, and I don't think Bob meant anything malicious by this, and I agree with him. But most of them that have been put out to date have been terrible. They're not like fully inclusive. I think certain bands put them out to maybe glorify them as part of in their part in this movement. I know Stryper did a fundraiser to do a Stryper one, but I really would love to see one that would really take the movement from the embryonic stages, even from the, even, let's go back from the movie, the Jesus Revolution, where what was the name of the original?
Frisbee?
Yeah, but the band that came out of that. Love Song? Love Song. That kind of started with like Larry Norman, and then where the music started getting like edgy, and it got edgier and edgier. We were getting now to the point of now we're like, yeah. It's like, it's gone beyond. Who knows where it's going to go from here? But anyways, I'd love to see a really, really and my friend Ray and I have talked about, because he's a videographer himself, doing a really quality, non-biased, non-agenda documentary on this whole movement, and Stryper would have to be part of it because they're such a huge part of it. But it wouldn't be anybody's focus of any band. It would just be focused on the movement and how God used it.
Yeah.
Well,
there was just let me make just a really quick comment. So Paul Doty wrote a book called When the Rubber Meets the Road. And because he was our blood goods sound technician, and his wife Leslie was their lighting technician, and then we recruited him to come on the road with us when he wrote this book called When the Rubber Meets the Road. And that, that is, that would, I haven't read it in a long time. It's been many, many years. And then, believe it or not, Steve Whitaker's mom wrote a book called The Calling of a Rock Star.
Yeah.
And so it would be good to write actually chapters of stories. I think just like you guys were talking about the posts, it's about the story, and about a well-told story that can draw people in and go, hey, I'm there, right there with you, and George is right. Focusing on the quality of it and being lighthearted and true and honest and authentic. So
yeah, that's a good idea what you said. Make it everything, even a video, a documentary movie, where every band that and everybody's going to want to get into it. And there's certain bands that had more impact than others, let's face it. But everybody should have their own little chapter in the way the Vengeance here, because Vengeance had a big part of it. Remember, I told you earlier that and you missed what I said, but for some reason Bob had a special liking to Vengeance, and the only other band that's probably second in Bob's list was Barren Cross, but he really wanted to push these guys because again there was a huge hole, there was a need there, and that would be a great chapter or segment of like a documentary on the whole Vengeance thing, But anyway,
yeah.
Well, we just, you know, like, and you know, Jim and Ray blessed us with an interview a little while back, and Jim's heard us say this, but you know, you guys were like, you guys were youth ministers to us, because the Lord's word was there, the good news of Christ, and that's God's word. And you guys knew how to present it in the lingo for us when we were young teenagers. And you guys were kind of like our big brothers and youth ministers. And I listened very intently to those albums, and not just because of the music, but, you know, listening to the words and what was being said.
Yeah, can I tell a story real quick that a guy told me? I always want to say a kid told me at Immortal Fest, but now he's a 50-something-year-old kid. He told me, listen to this. This is hilarious. He goes, I have a story to tell you about weapons. I go, okay. And he goes, when I was a kid, my dad would not let me listen to any kind of metal, not even Christian metal. So I go, oh, really? He goes, he was real strict. He was a pastor. So he said, I go, Dad, just read these lyrics on this album. And he handed him weapons. And Dad goes, all right, I'll do that for you. So the dad took the record, scrutinized all the lyrics and everything, and read everything. And he gave it back to his son, I don't know, a week later or whatever. He says, okay, you can listen to this one.
Awesome.
Very cool. Very cool. So
I go, thank you for sharing that. That makes me feel good. That it passed your pastor father's, you know, scrutiny. That was awesome.
That's right.
Well, I just have a few questions here, George, left, and thank you guys for all joining us, and we love you all. It's just, this is so awesome. George, does Human Code have any upcoming concerts scheduled? I know you did one right after Immortal Fest. Do you guys have anything in the works concert-wise yet?
Yes, we do actually at the BMI Center, which is Brent Event Center, where we just had Immortal Fest. The owner contacted us, and we're going to be opening up for Tom Kiefer February 24th, which
Awesome.
that's the Cinderella guy.
Yeah,
and he's out of Nashville here, and that guy still got it. I mean, I don't know if anybody's out there with Cinderella fans, but I used to like them. But yeah, so that's going to be fun, you know. So that's I think what Steve out there, Barnes at Immortal Fest is trying to do is kind of mix in the secular bands with the Christian bands.
Oh, I love that.
You know, so
we used to do that back in the day. That was happening.
Yeah, that's a smart thing to do. It really is, and not just for the audience, but even for the musicians backstage. That's probably possibly even more important. You know, to be an influence to other musicians. I just heard today, and I don't know if it's true, but I want it to be true, is that Mark Slaughter just came to faith and became a Christian. So, hey, God's working, man, and he's working, you know, and Jim said today in today's service, and we've been saying this kind of our sanctuary thing, there's a new revival going on here, you know, and you know what, but I don't just want, in my mind's eye, I don't just want it to be the old guys. I want to see these new kids like start to like have an excitement for playing music and using their talents for the Lord, not for themselves. That'd be awesome.
Okay.
I might just make a quick comment. Some of the things that really stir my heart is when I hear about somebody that gave their heart to Christ back in the early 80s or mid 80s, or at a Deliverance concert or Vengeance or Barren Cross or whatever, that are now shepherding churches. That rings my bell. And I think when I hear that they are shepherding, that they're pastoring, that says that we did a few things right. Maybe we did a few things wrong, whatever. But man, I mean, George, seriously, man, it's like you hear that and you're just like, man, you're pastoring a church with 250 people in it. Man, that is phenomenal. You know, so.
Yeah, I met a guy that told at Immortal Fest that told me he listened to Weapons. Again, Weapons, I guess, you know, thank God. because we're just four dorky dudes that decide to play music for the Lord. Nothing special about us. I assure you that.
Can I get a witness?
Can I get
Fact check number 2. Very true.
yeah, here's my fact checker back here. Anyway, this guy told me he was listening to the Weapons, and he was listening to all these secular bands at the time, and the Lord really used that record to bring him to faith and to have him, start walking with the Lord. Now he's a pastor of. And I go, "You're a pastor?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "How many people in your church?" He goes, 400. I go, "That is awesome, dude." So what Jim just said, wow, you're right.
Yeah,
Well, that's what I call the ripple effect, guys.
There you go. There you go.
That's what's supposed to happen. And that is, you guys really were, the pioneers and all of that. And like me,
And let's give all glory to God, because again, I just told you, we're dorks. That just
Christ's original commission: go out and tell the world.
Yep.
And it did.
Yeah, and something that's transpiring right now, that's happening right in the moment, is what's happening with Sanctuary. And the three of us actually just got back from an awesome weekend. We're sort of coming to redefine what it means to actually be the body of Christ. And and redefining our original template was Acts 2:42. That the apostles met together, they had a meal together, they prayed for one another, had fellowship, and they had prayer. And so we've been doing this thing now once a month here in Nashville, and people are just coming in from all over. One guy drove 8 hours for one fellowship, and so we're getting together. We're having a barbecue where we sup together. And we spent a couple hours having a meal together, and then we strike up our worship band. And man, the sweetness of the worship is just, unbelievable. And Pastor Bob gets up and gives us a message. And then last night people didn't go home until like 10:30 at night. And we started the whole event at 3.
Yeah.
That is wonderful.
Yeah. And then on Sunday morning, we have breakfast with everybody. Some of the guys cooked pancakes, and we had brisket. It was unbelievable. And
we had brisket.
Oh, the brisket was unbelievable.
I didn't get any.
Somebody brought a brisket. We call him Brisket Johnny now because he brought the brisket.
I got none.
Yeah, and then again, we had our worship, our fellowship time. We ate a meal together. We prayed for one another. We saw a really substantial, good miracle this morning. So it's like, we just feel like there's just something to be said about, hey, how did the apostles do it in the early church? So
describing that, Jim, it made me think of the early church in the Bible. It's like that sounds like the way they did it back then. I mean, yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Pastor Bob said today, says even with all the, this will strike you guys and everybody that's even listening, that has dedicated themselves to working or getting into ministry. When did God ever tell you to quit?
I know.
And I love when Bob said that. I go, you're absolutely right. When did God ever tell you to quit?
Never.
Mm-hmm.
So I take it.
There's no retirement. I don't believe.
Yeah. There's no retirement from ministry. You're right.
Ministry.
There you go.
Well, George, I have 2 more questions. And you spoke about this already. What do you have on the horizon? And we know that the new Worldview record is coming out sometime. You got anything else going on that you can say or not? Or
I've been bugging. I'm gonna, just because Jim's here, I'm gonna say this, but I've been offering to Jim, and I think they're gonna take me up on it. We'll see. Where I want to work with Barren Cross as far as like maybe producing their next either album or whatever, a few songs that they put out. So we may do something like that.
I think there's a very good possibility of that happening.
Yeah.
I got home a couple of weeks ago, and threw a riff down, and I sent it to Ray and Mike, and they were like, "Hey, I think I like that," which is, to hear two musicians that are seasoned like that. So yeah, we're looking forward to getting, doing something, doing some music
Wonderful.
right here in this beautiful studio, which is like 10 minutes from my house. So I kind of like
You need it before you go. You need to show them your studio. Do a 360.
I'll do a 360. Another thing is I am going to finish up this Human Code record, then jump on to finishing up because it's already written the Worldview record. I just got to get Ray up here, or I got to go down to his place in Florida and record the vocals. So that will come out. Glen's moving up here he lives in LA still, but he's moving to Nashville area in October, November. So Glen and I have been playing together on and off for years. I mean, we've never put out a record together, but I think you might see something coming down the line. We're talking with possibly Chris Howell doing a project with him. So it would be cool, like these three guys right here, us three, maybe with Chris Howell, and then we'll start auditioning singers. Now, here's what I'm thinking about for singers, and who knows, they don't even know about this, but I don't know. I wouldn't mind talking.
They might throw rocks at us.
I wouldn't mind talking to the guy from Disciple, see if he was interested. See if I forgot his name.
Okay,
Kevin Young.
Kevin. Yeah, talking to possibly Jamie Rowe, Luke Easter. These are all guys that live in Nashville. I want to jam with guys in Nashville. Now, I love Human Code and everything like that, but yeah, and we're going to put out a phenomenal record. But those guys live in California. I live in Nashville, so it's a little tough to have a long distance band. It'd be cool to work with guys that are all local. We can get together, have a barbecue, do a jam, get into the Word, and then just like, okay, Lord, it's all yours, and just do a project and with guys that actually know how to play a little bit, So something like that's going to be in the booth probably 2024. So we'll see what happens.
Cool. Well, George, I'm going to ask you this question, but I'm also going to let Glen and Jim answer if they would like to also. George, what words of wisdom or what would you like to say to all your friends and fans over the years to our viewers?
First of all, I hate the word fans in a sense because I look at them as friends and family.
Well, that's kind of why I say friends and fans. I know a lot of people do not like that fan terminology, but yeah.
Well, if you're an egotistical, jerkwad, you might like it because you like people people to adore you and this and that. It's funny when I meet people, and I'll tell you what I did at Immortal Fest. And again, I'm not trying to come off spiritual because believe me, you just follow me around for 24 hours, we'll dispel that notion real quick.
Can I get a witness?
Fact checker, come on,
number 3. Fact check number 3.
Correct. Anyway, so let's dispel that. So I'm not trying to sound all spiritual, but I did make a point to start asking people. So hey, how's the Lord using you right now? Yeah. What are you doing in Christ right now? And I didn't come off and hey, what are you doing for God? I wasn't doing it in a judgmental way, more in a concerning way. And some people really appreciated that. And that's what I want to portray to everybody that's listening. What are you doing for the Lord right now? And if you're not, pray about it. Ask God, because He's given you specifically a talent for His kingdom's sake. Use it. Don't be like the person that buried his talents and didn't use them, because we're, again, what I say, fact check number 4, we're nothing special here. We're not the guys that God's using. God's using you. God wants to use you. The lady, there's this one lady, I forgot her name, forgive me, but she led one person to Christ in her whole Christian life. She was a Christian almost all her life. And that person she led to Christ, that one person she led to Christ, his name was Billy Graham. It ended up doing massive work. So, it doesn't have to be these big grandiose things you do for Christ, like putting out records and that. I mean, the first shall be last shall be first. So God will use not just about, He'll use anybody who's willing to serve Him and to do His will, and I don't know what that ministry is, only and God knows. So I would ask you to get on your knees and ask God, use me any way you can. And guess what? He will. He'll reveal that to you, and He will use you as long as you're willing. So that's what I have to say. Anyway, your turn.
All right, listen. I'm not a guy with a whole lot of words, but I'm gonna ride on the back of George and what he had just said. I when it comes to fans and they come up to me, like even this weekend, you know, that people come up, I'm not a big, I get kind of not uncomfortable, but I'm like, I'm really nobody. You know what I mean? I'm like, I'm nobody. I'm just
Fact check number 6.
Can I get a witness?
But yeah, I do. I would ride on the back of what George just said and ask them, what are you doing for Christ? How is your walk with God? What are you doing? You know what I mean? Are you serving your family or what? So that I would definitely agree with George on what he had just said. So now I'm going to exit and give the floor to Jim.
Let me just add one thing, and that is the so Barren Cross got to play last year at the Immortal Fest, which was a great time. When we got done playing, we always go to our merch booth. That's what every good band should do, is go to their merch booth, and everybody kind of gathers around. And as people were coming up, they were starting to ask me lots of questions. And every person, I said, you got one question. And I said, I'll let you ask me one question. And so they would ask their one question. And I said, now give me 3 things about you. You know, give me 3 things about your life. And so the first guy that I said that to, he said, yeah, I'm really going through a tough time. And I said, well, what's going on? He says, basically, he's dying from congestive heart failure. You know, and that just puts everything into perspective right there. You know, and when you start having authentic conversations with people and you just turn around, and it's not so much about the band, like George says, it's about, hey man, tell me about what's going on in your life, and just give me 3 things or 4 things. And I got some really awesome, you know, some awesome answers. You know, one guy brought his 4 adult children, and I said, give me something about, you know, each one of you guys. And one of them actually said, I know how to spell and pronounce, and I know the meaning of the longest English word in the English dictionary, and I can spell it. You know, so it's just, you know, getting beyond yourself and knowing that, hey, listen, we're not rock stars, we're regular people. And look, when I play a Barren Cross concert and I'm going to a concert, for goodness sakes. I'm at a concert. I'm just happen to be playing, and I want to enjoy that concert as much as the people are in the front row, you know. And it is about family. It's about connecting with people, you know, and looking them in the eye, getting hand contact with people, knowing that, hey, listen, we're flesh and blood, and, you know, and we are not anything more special than you are. We're all special. We are children of the Most High God. So that makes us all special, all equal in God's eyes. So, and with that, I'm going to have to sign off. So, but anyway.
Why are you leaving?
Okay.
Well,
He's got to go, I guess.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jim, for joining us. It was a pleasure as always, my friend.
you guys are always a blessing.
Thank
you guys
you.
take care of yourself.
Thank you.
All right, buddy.
Cool.
I'm leaving you with him.
Okay.
Nobody to give the witnesses.
Okay.
So now we can talk about them. They're gone.
George, regarding 1995's Primitive Rhythm Machine with Mortification, Steve Rowe, I was just curious because Steve lives, you know, he's from the land down under. Whenever you produced that album, did you go to where Steve was at, or did Steve come here in order, because you also performed guitar on that album? How did that transpire that you produced and performed on that album?
Steve called me because he just, you know, we're both on Intense Records Frontline,
Right.
and he did call me, and he came here because the Frontline studios are in Orange County, California. So he came here.
Okay.
And I lived in a place called Santa Clarita, which is a little north of Los Angeles. But still Los Angeles County. And so he stayed with me at my house, and he and the band, he had two guys from Canada. It's kind of a funny story. It's a little bit of a negative one that turned into a positive thing, but the guitar player that ended up, I think his name was, no, not Jason was his drummer. I forgot the guitar player's name, but bottom line is I guess they were having some arguments about certain things. The guy wasn't really giving Steve his due respect as far as him being the former of this band and the leader of this band. The Mortification is Steve Earle's band.
Sure.
And he was like given we're in the studio recording, and Steve was telling him to play a certain part. He wouldn't do it. He wanted to do it his own way. So Steve is such a nice guy and patient that to see him at the end of his rope, and I was trying to be that kind of like the neutral, like producer guy, because I was just supposed to produce it. Bottom line is Steve pulled me aside. He said, "Hey, can you play the guitars on this record?" I said, "I don't know any of the songs." He goes, "We'll just figure it out." He goes, "Can you do it?" I go, "I guess I can do it." And okay, good, because I'm going to fire such and such. So I ended up firing him, sending him home, putting him on a plane, took him to the airport. And I learned the songs right then and there. Steve taught them to me, and okay, hit record, and I played on the record. So like, again, I wasn't supposed to play on it. And then I brought in a friend of mine, Dave Kellogg, to do some leads. So that was an absolute pleasure. I'm telling you, something about Steve Rowe and I, when we're in a room together, I can't even think of a person that I laughed with so much with. He is like such a crack up, and we made each other constantly laugh. I think we had one laughing session where I was like almost peeing. I mean, that's how hard we were laughing. I mean, I don't know why I remember that about Steve. I mean, obviously we had wonderful fellowship in the Lord, but at the same time, we like just really made each other laugh. And it's such a pleasurable memory for me to think of Steve, like, that I just, when I think of Steve, I think the guy I laugh with, and we had a great time together. And if you ever ask me again, hey, if you decide to do it, you do another more, I go, absolutely, because I want to laugh again. That was my butt off. I mean, I've laughed since then, but I don't know why. I just remember that about him.
Well, it's a wonderful album. I really enjoyed it. Kind of a last two-parter question here, George. I noticed is M24, which is on the Worldview album from 2015, is that your own label?
It's kind of, well,
because it has the Human Code logo to it.
Yeah, well, we kind of stole it from Human Code, stole it from M24. This guy named Robert Wilson out of Atlanta, he's kind of the artist guy I use. He also uses the term Diggerson, I think. And he's a wonderful artist. If anybody needs some album work or anything, Robert Wilson, look him up on Facebook. Or if you need him, you can hit me up. I'll give you his info. But he designed our logo in Human Code and Worldview. And M24. So M24 is kind of my own label. It's a long story, but Worldview originally was on Alterium Records out of Sweden, but we had some differences of, he wanted us to be more 80s and screams and dive bombs, and I wanted to bring the band a little bit more modern Worldview. So we kind of parted ways, and is originally going to be on his label. So I kind of created this M24 music group to put out the record, so it just wouldn't be blank. So since then, we've had many.
And that was the original name of the band.
Oh, yeah. And that we were going to use M24 as the name of a band that we're going to do. I was going to form that band with Glenn. Yeah, you just reminded me. And M24 is short for the apocalyptic, chapter in the Bible, Matthew 24. So it's very biblically based, obviously. And boy, that's some of that stuff coming true these days in Matthew 24. But so we've talked many times since then of making it a kind of a legit label. And who knows, something like that may be down the works. I mean, I've been in conversation with a few big names that were kind of talking about that, doing something that would maybe be a label that helps resurrect some of these older bands. But at the same time, I really want to work with some younger bands and get some young blood in there. That excites me. Like Jim said earlier about ringing my bell, that rings my bell. If I can work with some young bands, guys that love God, Worldview and I just ended up working with not Worldview, Human Code, with Chaotic Resemblance. Now they're not extremely young guys, but man, be on the lookout for them. They are ministers of Christ, man. Chaotic Resemblance, and that's the type of band I like to work with. Just hungry guys that are good musicians, and that love the Lord, and they really love the Lord, man. They are very bold in their witness, and I'd love to work with people like that. So who knows what M24 has for in the future? We'll see. It's in God's hands.
My last question then, George. Worldview. Your first album was a 2015 release. We're highly anticipating the next one. Where's the best place for friends to go to purchase that album, the first album, or the second coming up?
I have tons of them in my closet right behind me. Here's what I wanted to do. I can sell them now. What I was probably going to do is when we release the next record, I was going to do a 2-for-1 till these sell out. I think I have a few hundred of them. Like the first 300 purchases of our new record, I'm going to include the first record. So you're going to get a 2-for-1. That's my plan. So I could sell them now. We do have a website called worldviewmetalband.com, worldviewmetalband.com.
Okay.
And I'll make sure this week we'll put them up there and make them available, because I do have a few hundred of them back there.
Was that really 2015?
Yes. So it's been a while.
Oh my gosh.
It's been a while now. Yeah. So,
man.
So my plan again, I'll sell some now, because I think Rex said it. That's a grossly under promoted album. It's probably, Weapons, of course, was a big stellar moment for me, but it's probably my proudest album to date. I mean, because I put so much work into it, in the Worldview, and Human Code is going to be another really album that I put a lot of work into too. So, but to date, I love that Worldview first record, and I think our next one's going to be even better. To be honest with you.
Two things about Worldview, friends, that I'll say this. Angelic Warlord gave it a 90%, which is an outstanding score. So keep that in mind about Worldview. And also our brother Jeremy Brown over at Torrential RIFF Reviews, and I'll post that in the link too. He gave it a 2 thumbs up, and he gives you an in-depth look and listen into the first Worldview album. So it's a wonderful release.
Thank you.
And George, I'm hearing all kinds of awesome stuff about your studio. If you don't mind, if you would, could you kind of give us a little view of your studio here?
Well, let me see. Let me take this off of here.
I'm really curious about this. You have just a couple guitars.
I have a couple guitars there.
Yeah, just a couple.
Here. And here's my my console and my
yep.
And all that.
Awesome.
So that's kind of cool stuff I got there.
Wow.
Got my racks under here. Let's see if you can see all those.
Yep.
There's my dog. Can you guys see my dog?
Yeah.
She loves hanging out here. I normally have a wall of stacks here. There's only one of my stacks right now.
Okay.
But then I've got my V drums here.
Okay.
Which are really cool. Glenn hates electronic drums, by the way.
Amen. Amen, Glenn. Testify. Yep.
And which I love electronic. And then there's my amp packs for all the bass players.
Okay.
Nice.
So there's get out of the way, Glenn, so we can get all the guitars. So there's a wall of guitars.
Wow.
That's nice,
Wow.
George.
And then here's my little lounge area.
Sure.
This is where my dog that just passed away. This was his favorite couch.
Yeah.
Jesse was my studio dog that just passed away, and he was always in here with me. And that was his favorite couch. Oh, I miss Jesse. So there you go. I mean,
awesome.
I love. We've done some cool stuff in here. I plan to do even more, and not just my stuff, but I love to work with other people. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm getting older, so it's time to, not that I can't play.
Sure.
I guess I sell my chops, but
Wait. I'm saying goodbye. I'm going to go downstairs. So
we will be in contact, Glenn. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm almost done, I think. But so that my plan is to, again, sail off into the sunset, hopefully working with other bands. That's what I want to do.
Awesome. Well, today's scripture for Message from Home, George, your worldview record is titled Chosen Few, and I believe this scripture talks about that, and it's from Matthew chapter 22 verse 14, and I'm going to read part of it here. It says, and this is Jesus speaking. He's talking in a parable, and he says, "For many are invited, but few are chosen." And I just think, that lets us know that, the path to get into heaven, as we've seen in several scriptures, is narrow and hard to get to, but that we need to keep on persevering for that, and we will have our reward then. And so I just want to thank you for all of your time, George, and all the guests that we had today. This has just been awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So if you'll just hang on 2 seconds after this, George, we'll let you go. But now, friends, we're going to say bye, and we'll see you later. Thank you so much.
Thanks, George.
God bless
Thanks,
you guys.
everybody.
Thank you.
God bless you guys.
Okay, so
Wait.
okay.
Let me just say something
Go ahead.
because I gotta use the bathroom. I gotta use the boys'
Don't
room.
say that on the interview.
Sorry.
Well,
Okay,
Glenn,
so
though,
then-
I do want you to come back, Glenn, whenever you get done, please.
Oh, yeah. I'm gonna come back in the picture if you guys are still talking. By the way, so
Yes. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Glenn.
Things that you don't do in an interview is take a potty break.
Yeah,
This is why we don't do them live, though, Jim.
I know, okay.
It'll all be edited. You'll never know.
Or will
Okay.
they?